In 642 AD, Arab armies conquered Alexandria, one of the greatest cities in the Christian world. So how quickly did its population become Muslim? Over a century later, Egypt was still majority Christian. Why would a conquering empire not impose its own religion? And the answer has less to do with tolerance and everything to do with taxes. How did this work in practice? Let's start with what happened when a city like Alexandria fell to Arab conquerors. When Alexandria surrendered, ordinary people kept their homes, their property, their religion, their jobs, and their local customs. The conquerors seized state treasuries, church lands, and the estates of fleeing nobles, but left everyone else alone. This wasn't generosity. The conquerors intended to govern, not pillage. They wanted a functioning economy that could generate revenue for decades, not a one-time looting spree. A burned city pays no taxes. A working city does. The Caliphate built its revenue on a two-tier tax system. Non-Muslims, called dhimmis, meaning protected subjects, paid two taxes. First, the jizya, a flat poll tax charged per person or per household. Second, the kharaj, a land tax that varied based on how much land you held. Muslims paid neither of these. Instead, they paid only the zakat, a religious tithe, roughly 2.5% of wealth. Here's the critical detail most people miss. For most Christians and Jews, the total tax burden under Arab rule was comparable to what they paid under the Byzantine or Persian empires. Their daily economic life barely changed. The empire at the top changed. The tax collector's boss changed. The amount on the bill, about the same. The conquerors replaced top officials and nobles, the political layer, but they kept the existing bureaucrats. Why? Those bureaucrats held the tax records. They knew who owned what land, who owed what amount, and how the collection system worked. In Syria and Egypt, the administrative language stayed Greek. In Persia, it stayed Persian. Arabic was the language of the conquerors, but not the language of governance. Not yet. This wasn't cultural generosity. It was logistical necessity. You cannot collect taxes if you cannot read the ledgers. Now here's where the economics get counterintuitive, right? And where the real insight of this story lives. Walk through the math, around 80% of the Caliphate's population was non-Muslim, paying higher taxes. Every time someone converted to Islam, they moved from the higher tax bracket to the lower one. Every conversion reduced state revenue. The Caliphate had a structural financial incentive to keep people Christian, Jewish, or Zoroastrian. The practical attitude toward conquered populations was straightforward. Practice your religion, go to church on Sunday, pay your taxes. The state didn't need your soul. It needed your silver. This is the conversion paradox, a conquering religious empire with an economic reason not to spread its own religion. The timeline tells the story. Arab armies conquered Egypt in 642, a military campaign lasting roughly a decade. But in 750 AD, when the Abbasid revolution overthrew the Umayyad dynasty, over a century after conquest, Egypt was still majority Christian. Scholars estimate Egypt didn't reach a Muslim majority until somewhere around 1000 AD. That's roughly 350 years after the initial conquest. And today, about 10% of Egypt's population is Coptic Christian, a living echo of this centuries-long process. Conquest took years, Islamization took centuries. The distinction matters enormously. Conversion happens through social incentives, intermarriage, career advantages, and gradual cultural integration, and not through decree, not through coercion. Political conquest was rapid. Religious transformation was glacially slow. So what's the bigger lesson here? The one that applies far beyond the 7th century Middle East. Empires that survive don't usually do so by destroying what they conquer. They co-opt existing systems. The early caliphate is a case study in pragmatic imperialism. It preserved local institutions, languages, and religions, not out of abstract tolerance, but because that was the most effective way to extract revenue and maintain order. Economic structures shaped religious outcomes in ways no one intended. The tax system designed to fund an empire accidentally slowed the spread of that empire's own faith. Next time you hear about a conquest, ask yourself, what changed for ordinary people? The answer is often far less than you think. The fact that Egypt is still 10% Christian today, that's a living echo of a tax policy written 14 centuries ago.